Malaysia-Turkmenistan committed to enhancing existing bilateral ties. And also, United Nations calls for free and fair elections in Syria. Good afternoon and Salam Malaysia Madani. I'm Brendan Lepal. Malaysia and Turkmenistan are committed to enhance their existing bilateral cooperation across various sectors, including oil and gas, through the establishment of a joint commission. Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim stated that the commission will be followed up by the foreign ministers of both countries next year.
We have seen a strengthening of this collaboration, and also we have seen their willingness and support to our industries, particularly Petronas Carigali, and I must, on behalf of Malaysian government and people, extend my appreciation and thanks and assure the President that this collaboration will be extremely meaningful to ensure the mutual benefit and success for both countries.
Datuk Seri Anwar and Turkmenistan President Serdar Berdi Muhammadov also witnessed 7 exchange of memorandums between the two countries. The memorandum includes the partial visa cancellation, flight services and aviation industry, the cooperation agreement between the Malaysian Institute of Foreign Relations and Turkmenistan. Earlier, Berdi Muhammadov was accorded an official welcoming ceremony at the Perdana Putra complex. He is on a 2-day official visit to Malaysia, marking his inaugural visit to the country since assuming office in March 2022. Datuk Seri Anwar received him on his arrival this morning, after which the national anthems of both countries were played. He inspected a guard of honour mounted by 3 officers and 103 members from the 1st Battalion of the Royal Malay Regiment. Also present were Deputy Prime Ministers Datuk Seri Dr. Ahmad Zahid Hamidi and Datuk Seri Fadilah Yusof, Foreign Minister Datuk Seri Muhammad Hassan, other cabinet members, foreign diplomats and senior government officials. Berdi Muhammadov signed the guest book before proceeding to a meeting with Datuk Seri Anwar. The United Nations envoy to Syria has called for free and fair elections after the ouster of President Bashar al-Assad. Assad fled Syria following a lightning offensive spearheaded by the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. More than 13 years after his crackdown on democracy, protests precipitated one of the deadliest wars of the century. Years of civil war have left the country heavily dependent on aid, deeply fragmented and desperate for justice and peace. Addressing reporters in Damascus, UN Special Envoy Geir Pedersen said there's a lot of hope that people can now see the beginning of a new Syria.
A new Syria that, in line with Security Council Resolution 2254, will adopt a new constitution that will ensure that there is a social contract, a new social contract for all Syrians, and that we will have free and fair elections when that time comes, after a transitional period, also in line with Security Council Resolution 2254.
Calling for immediate humanitarian assistance, he also said he hoped to see an end to international sanctions levied against Syria. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham had assured protection for the country's many religious and ethnic minorities. It has appointed a transitional leadership that will run the country until the 1st of March next year. On a related note, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said Turkey and Lebanon would work together on Syria after the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad by opposition forces.
Suriye'de artık yeni bir dönem başlamıştır. Suriye'nin 2 önemli komşusu olarak birlikte hareket etmemiz gerektiği hususunda mutabıkız. Suriye'nin istikrarı bölgenin istikrarı demektir. Türkiye ve Lübnan olarak müşterek hedefimiz Suriye'yi yeni bir şevkle ayağa kaldırmaktır. Biz kardeşliğimizin ve komşuluğumuzun gereğini neyse dün olduğu gibi bugün ve yarın da yapmaya devam edeceğiz.
Erdogan added that reconstruction of the war-ravaged country on their borders would be their priority. To rebuild Syria, Erdogan said, this is a critical period in which everyone needs to act with unity, solidarity and mutual reconciliation. Turkey and Lebanon are home to a large number of Syrian refugees. Meanwhile, the first flight since the ouster of Syria's President Bashar al-Assad took off from Damascus airport to Aleppo in the country's north. 43 people, including journalists, were on board the Syrian airplane. Assad fled Syria as a lightning opposition forces offensive launched on 27 November wrested city after city from his control. His army and security forces abandoned Damascus airport on 8 December, and until yesterday, no flights had taken off or landed. Among the changes at the airport is the display of the Syrian flag, which has been switched from the previous 2-star flag to a new one, featuring 3 stars. Citing missing spare parts due to international sanctions, maintenance officials Samer Radi said Syrian Air has a fleet of 12 planes, but only 2 both Airbus 320 are operational. Currently, there are still no international flights scheduled at the airport given the uncertain security conditions across Syria. The country's border crossings remain closed as the newly formed transitional government is trying to roll out new measures for the entry of both Syrians and foreigners. An airport official said that international flights are expected to resume on 24th December. In other news, Britain has unveiled a package of £225 million or 286 million US dollars in new military aid to Ukraine for next year, including drones, boats and air defense systems. The move came after the UK's Defense Secretary John Healey visited Kyiv, holding talks with his Ukrainian counterpart Rustem Umerov and vowing to step up British support to Ukraine in 2025. In July, the new Labour government vowed to commit £3 billion a year in military aid to Ukraine until 2030 to 2031. The Defence Ministry said in a statement that the new package will include £92 million for equipment to bolster Ukraine's navy, including small boats, reconnaissance drones and uncrewed surface vessels. A further £68 million will be used for air defence equipment, including radars and 1,000 counter-drone electronic warfare systems at a cost of £39 million would be supplied to the Ukrainian army. Healey said the UK would also boost a training program for Ukrainian soldiers run with key allies on British soil known as Operation Interflex, under which 51,000 recruits have been trained since mid-2022. In a related development, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha has urged Australia to beef up its military support to help Kyiv's armed forces fight off Russia's advancing troops. Sybiha was speaking at a press conference with his Australian counterpart Penny Wong, who was on a visit to the country fighting off Russia's invasion for almost 3 years.
Ситуація на полі бою залишається дуже складною. Потреба посилення наших воїнів залишається надзвичайно нагальною. Тому сьогодні я звернувся із запитом на додаткову військову підтримку, включаючи знамениті австралійські бушмастери.
Canberra has provided Kyiv with 120 Bushmaster armoured personnel carriers, which are designed to withstand the impact of landmines and improvised explosive devices. Ukraine has been struggling on the front lines against better-equipped Russian troops. Wong announced that Australia would contribute an additional $66 million in funding to the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development for Ukraine, as well as $10 million for Ukraine's energy sector, devastated by systematic Russian bombardment. Canberra's top diplomat also said that the Australian embassy in Kyiv would reopen from next month. Germany may increase the size of its armed forces to 230,000, up from the current target of 203,000, as the NATO alliance looks to boost its strength after the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Germany's armed forces currently has some 180,000 personnel in uniform, around 20,000 short of the current target, as it has been struggling for years to recruit people. The Defense Ministry said it is planning to increase the number of permanent staff to 203,000, or probably closer to 230,000 due to NATO's capability targets. NATO is set to agree new and more demanding targets for the number of allied forces and weapons next year, reflecting what the alliance sees as a deterioration of the security situation since Russia's full-scale attack on Ukraine. NATO planners believe the alliance will need between 35 and 50 extra brigades to withstand a Russian attack. A brigade consists of 3,000 to 7,000 troops, which would mean anywhere from 105,000 to 350,000 soldiers. Under this scenario, Germany, which usually provides around 10% of NATO's capabilities, would need 3 to 5 extra brigades or 20,000 to 30,000 additional combat troops.
North Korea has lashed out at provocation by the United States and its allies for criticizing Pyongyang's support for Russia's war in Ukraine. The foreign ministry said the 10 nations and the European Union were distorting and slandering Pyongyang's normal cooperative ties with Moscow.
The 10 nations and the EU said North Korea's growing involvement in the war in Ukraine in support of Russia constituted a dangerous expansion of the conflict, with serious consequences for European and Indo-Pacific security. They urged North Korea to cease immediately all assistance for Russia's war against Ukraine, including by withdrawing its troops. However, Pyongyang's foreign ministry fired back, denouncing and rejecting in the strongest terms the criticism of the US and its vassal forces. North Korea said the statement by the 10 nations and the EU indicated that the increased cooperation between Pyongyang and Moscow was effectively deterring the US and the West's ill-intended extension of influence. It did not specifically mention its troops deployment alongside Russian forces, only saying the war in Ukraine has been prolonged by what it called the adventuristic military policy and policy of exclusive alliance of Washington and its allies.
Coming up next, U.S. Fed cuts interest rates but cautions for year ahead. Stay tuned. The U.S. Federal Reserve has cut interest rates by a quarter point and signaled a slower pace of cuts ahead. Policymakers voted 11-1 to lower the central bank's key lending rate to between 4.25% and 4.50% as expected.
However, the policymakers also halved the number of quarter-point cuts they expect next year, from an average of 4 back in September to just 2, catching the markets by surprise. Chair Jerome Powell said that while inflation has eased significantly, the level remains somewhat elevated compared to the Fed's long-term target of 2%. He said he remained very optimistic about the state of the U.S. economy, adding that the Fed is now significantly closer to the end of its current easing cycle.
The outlook is pretty bright for our economy. We have to stay on task, though, and continue to have restrictive policies so that we can get inflation down to 2%.
It was the final planned rate decision before outgoing Democratic President Joe Biden makes way for Republican Donald Trump, whose economic proposals include tariff hikes and the mass deportation of millions of undocumented workers. Following Trump's victory in November's election, some analysts had already pared back the number of rate cuts they expected next year, warning that the Fed may be forced to keep rates higher for longer.
The International Monetary Fund, IMF, has reached an agreement on a $1.4 billion loan deal with the government of El Salvador to strengthen the Central American country's economy. The 40-month agreement, which also addresses the Salvadoran government's controversial use of the cryptocurrency Bitcoin as legal tender, must now be confirmed by the IMF's executive board, which is due to meet in the coming weeks.
The IMF said in a statement that the program aims to strengthen fiscal and external sustainability through implementation of an ambitious and growth-friendly fiscal consolidation plan. It added that the program is also focusing on enhancing reserve buffers. The program is expected to catalyze more financial support from the World Bank and several regional development banks to the tune of more than $3.5 billion over the period of the loan. The Salvadoran government, which was the first to recognize Bitcoin as an official currency alongside the dollar in 2021, has agreed that the cryptocurrency will only be accepted by the private sector on a voluntary basis, adding that Bitcoin-related risks are being mitigated.
The Democratic Republic of Congo has launched its campaign for a non-permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council for 2026 to 2027 in an official ceremony in Kinshasa.
Considered to be the most powerful body of the United Nations, the Security Council is responsible for maintaining international peace and security. It can take legally binding decisions, authorize the use of force, and impose sanctions. It is made up of 5 permanent members and 10 non-permanent members that are elected for 2-year terms by the General Assembly and do not have the power of veto. The Central African country has twice been elected as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council. Its foreign ministry hailed the experience of the Democratic Republic of Congo, which hosts one of the largest UN peacekeeping missions in the world, with 15,000 blue helmet forces. Elections for non-permanent member seats at the Security Council are slated for June next year. If elected, the Democratic Republic of Congo would get to influence the debate on peacekeeping and peace-building reform, as well as the reform of the UN's collective security system. The country vowed to bring experience in strengthening conflict resolution mechanisms to prevent wars and international tensions.
The European Union's new top diplomat, Kaja Kallas, has vowed to deliver tangible progress within 5 years on enlargement into the Western Balkans, as regional leaders held summit talks in Brussels.
Discussions around joining the bloc stretch back 20 years in the 6-nation Balkan region of almost 18 million people, with Brussels blowing hot and cold during that period. However, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has breathed fresh impetus into the process, with Brussels seeing it more as a part of geopolitical contest with Moscow and Beijing. Since the 2022 invasion, Ukraine and Moldova have both joined the queue with the hopefuls from the Western Balkans, namely Albania, Bosnia, Kosovo, North Macedonia, Montenegro and Serbia. But the aspirant countries have endured wildly different fortunes, with Kosovo still not recognized by 5 EU states and the furthest from membership, while Montenegro and Albania are frontrunners. Those 2 countries received a boost this week as they both made strides in the painstaking negotiation process with Brussels, with Montenegro leading the way on reforms. Even for the strongest candidate countries in the Balkans, the wait is still expected to drag on towards the end of the decade at least.
And in other news, an Indian Navy speedboat undergoing tests in the busy seas of the financial capital Mumbai lost control and slammed into a ferry, killing at least 13 people.
Maharashtra State Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis said doctors have declared at least 13 people dead, adding that more than 100 people had been rescued. The ferry was carrying passengers from the Gateway of India, a colonial-era monument on the waterfront that is symbolic of Mumbai, to the popular tourist spot of Elephanta Island, famous for its rock carvings. India's Navy said a Navy craft undergoing engine trials lost control and collided with the passenger ferry. It explained that there had been an engine malfunction. It also said the fatalities included 1 naval service member and 2 representatives of an equipment manufacturer taking part in the tests. It added search and rescue efforts were immediately launched with 4 naval helicopters flying overhead, while 11 naval craft and 4 Coast Guard or police boats searched the waters. Following the mishap, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced an ex gratia payment of 200,000 rupees from the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund for the next of kin of each deceased in the boat accident, and that the injured would be given 50,000 rupees.
The death toll from cyclone Chido in Mozambique has risen by 11 to 45. In an updated toll, the country's National Disaster Center said 38 people were killed in Cabo Delgado, 4 in Nampula province and 3 in Niassa, further inland.
Initial figures released on Tuesday said the cyclone had claimed 34 lives after making landfall in Mozambique on Sunday at the northern Cabo Delgado province. Nearly 500 people were reported injured by the cyclone, which brought winds of around 260 kilometers an hour and heavy rainfall of around 250 millimeters in 24 hours. Nearly 24,000 homes were destroyed and another 12,300 partially destroyed, with more than 181,000 people affected by the storm. Chido struck a part of northern Mozambique that is regularly battered by cyclones and is already vulnerable because of conflict and underdevelopment. The cyclone landed in Mozambique after hitting the Indian Ocean island of Mayotte, where it is feared to have killed hundreds and possibly even thousands of people.
Over in France, the government has declared exceptional natural disaster measures for Mayotte as authorities grapple with the full scale of the devastation brought by Cyclone Chido on the Indian Ocean archipelago, racing against time to search for survivors and supply aid.
Mayotte will fall under the exceptional natural disaster designation, a new emergency system for overseas territories for a month. The measures are renewable every 2 months and they will enable the local and national authorities to react more quickly while streamlining certain administrative procedures. Prime Minister François Bayrou said the tragedy of Mayotte is probably the worst natural disaster in the past several centuries of French history. Rescuers raced to find survivors in the ruins of shanty towns while also unblocking roads and clearing rubble. Located near Madagascar off the coast of southeastern Africa, Mayotte is France's poorest region. According to meteorologists, Cyclone Chido was the latest in a string of storms worldwide fueled by climate change.
Oral cholera vaccine production last month reached its highest level in more than a decade. However, the World Health Organization warned that there was still not enough to meet the surging demand.
The WHO had warned in October that a global stockpile was effectively depleted, hampering attempts to bring the disease under control. The UN Health Agency said production of oral vaccine doses surged last month thanks to new formulations and manufacturing methods. This increase allowed the average stock to rise to 3.5 million doses in November compared to 600,000 in October, closer to the 5 million doses needed for emergency stockpile at all times for effective outbreak response. However, the agency said increased production has not met the rising global demand, warning that this persistent shortage continues to hinder efforts to control cholera outbreaks and respond promptly to the disease's spread. This year, 10 countries carried out reactive vaccination campaigns targeting 31 million people. Amid insufficient supplies, only one of the usual 2 doses were administered during those campaigns. As such, the WHO highlighted the urgent need to scale up production and improve strategic stockpile management to meet both reactive and preventive vaccination needs effectively.
Real Madrid beat Pachuca to lift Intercontinental Cup. Next in sports. Real Madrid won the Intercontinental Cup after beating Mexico's Pachuca 3-0 in the final, with Kylian Mbappe, Rodrigo and Vinicius Jr. scoring. It is Madrid's second title of the season following their UEFA Super Cup triumph over Atalanta in August, a welcome boost after what coach Carlo Ancelotti admitted had been a difficult period.
It was a largely one-sided contest at the Lusail Stadium in Qatar, with Real doing just enough and never looking likely to cede control, despite allowing their opponents to threaten occasionally from counter-attacks. The Champions League winners opened the scoring in the 37 minutes with a fine team goal that started with Jude Bellingham passing to Vinicius Jr., who ran past the goalkeeper before putting it on a plate for Mbappe, who tapped it into the empty net. Rodrigo extended their lead with a lovely effort in the 52nd minute when he beat 2 defenders before cutting back inside and curling a fine strike into the top corner with his right foot. Vinicius Jr. wrapped up an easy win for Real from a penalty spot in the 83rd minute after Usama Idrissi fouled captain Lucas Vazquez inside the box. Having won 3 trophies in the original Intercontinental Cup, the predecessor to the current format that pitched the European and South American champions against each other, and 5 Club World Cups, Real have won a combined total of 9 global titles.
Still on football, coach Ruben Amorim said Manchester United are better with Marcus Rashford after the forward said he was ready for a new challenge when asked about his future at the Old Trafford. The 27-year-old England international was left out of United's squad for Sunday's derby against Manchester City, which they went on to win 2-0 in dramatic fashion at the Etihad Stadium.
I spoke with a lot of players individually and during trainings. What I want is to take the best of Marcus Rashford as the players. So I don't talk about the future, I just talk about the present. I want the best of each one of them. And that is the key point for me. I just want to win and to help the team to be better. So we are better with Marcus Rashford, and that's simple. And we try different things to push Marcus to the best level that he's shown in the past. So that's all.
Capped 60 times for England, Rashford has been at United since the age of 7, scoring 138 goals in 426 appearances since making his senior debut for the club in 2016. Having won the Europa League, 2 FA Cups and the League Cup twice during his time at United, Rashford signed a new 5-year contract last year but has been linked with a move away from the club. He spoke on the subject on Tuesday while visiting his old school to hand out Christmas presents, saying he was ready for the next steps.
Moving on to tennis, Brazilian teenager João Fonseca stunned top seed and 2023 runner-up Arthur Fils with a 5-set victory in his next-gen ATP Finals opener. The 18-year-old Fonseca, the youngest player in the 8-man field, made light of his lowly 145th world ranking to defeat his 20th ranked French opponent 3-4, 4-2, 4-1, 1-4, 4-1.
Fils arrived in Jeddah as the title favourite, having been runner-up to Hamad Medjedovic last year, before winning Tour titles on the ATP Tour this season. However, Fonseca had defeated Fils at Rio in February for his maiden tour-level win. Elsewhere in the blue group, 122nd ranked Lerner Tien of the United States upset Czech world number 48 Jakub Mensik 4-3, 4-3, 2-4, 2-4, 4-3. Fonseca will face Tien in his next match tomorrow morning, having defeated the American in the final of the US Open Junior last year.
That wraps up all today. In our top story, Malaysia-Turkmenistan committed to enhancing existing bilateral ties. Tune in to Malaysia Tonight, coming up at 8:30 p.m. TV1 and saluran Berita RTM. Till then, I'm Brendan Lepal. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Thank you for watching. Take care.